So, as mentioned, thrilled to have Tim Vickery on the show, the oracle on all things South American football. Tim, thanks for joining us.
Lovely to be here. Let's kick the ball around.
I know in this part of the world, a lot of the commentary heading into this World Cup, which is not unusual, but it has been sort of socio-political, cultural, off the pitch. But a week today, it all begins on the pitch. So, what are your anticipation levels like for this one?
Well, despite everything, and there's a lot that despite is doing some heavy lifting there. Um, I still love it. It's still, and maybe that's that's a flaw in my personality, but I still find at the centre of the whole thing with the World Cup more than with the club game, I still find a sense of purity. Um, because so much of the club game has become the province of billionaires and equity funds and all the rest of it. At the heart of the national team game, I still think that there's a purity there. So yeah, I'm very very much looking forward to it, despite everything.
Yeah, and Joe Malloy, the normal presenter here, and myself would have worked on shows over the years where we're usually chatting to you about the story du jour and, football moves so fast. There's always a new headline each day. But it must have been nice for you. And I like to point listeners in the direction of your new book, Mundiales, which gave you a chance to maybe look at South American football with a wider lens and maybe crystallize your own life's work into a great anthology, ostensibly about the World Cup from a South American prism, but also football in the continent generally.
Yes, it's. Oh, thank you very much. It was. I never really wanted to do a book, but this ended up being fun to write. It's co-written, myself and Mark Biram, and that makes all the difference, I think, because South America is so vast, and quite often the Portuguese half of it, which is Brazil, doesn't know much about the Spanish half of it, which is the nine other footballing countries. So I'm obviously Brazil based. Mark is an academic with a lot of ties to Colombia and Ecuador, and he knows Argentina and Uruguay very well. So having those two voices, I think, has helped us tell the story, and it's a story that I think needs to be told. Very very few people are aware of just the role that South America played in getting the World Cup up and running. Were it not for South America, I don't think we would have had a World Cup until the mid 1950s. The country also, the continent also has the country that's won it the most times, and it has the current champions as well. And it's just where it means more. I think it's more. There's more of the country's identity invested in the World Cup. So it's Mundial is a one chapter. Our book is one chapter about each World Cup. So it's very easy to kind of dip in and read about any particular World Cup that you might have a special interest in. But if you step back, there is an arc there, and a lot of the arc is the story of Pelé, I think. And he's. I was thinking a lot about this recently with all of the Epstein file stuff. I know this is a stretch, but all the sex trafficking we kind of knew already. We knew that, it's sordid, but we knew it. What was really a shock to me with what we saw is just how much the extent to which that Epstein class see themselves as some kind of master race. And it's just stunning to me. And football's a great antidote to that. It's a fabulous antidote because where does the talent come from? From the kind of people that the Epstein files class absolutely despises. It comes from where people look least. It comes from the peripheries. And so our book, I think it's a play in three acts. Really, it's the opening is when you're waiting for a Pelé figure, and then in comes Pelé, and in the course of three World Cup wins in four, transforms Brazil into the country of football. But more than that, transforms the World Cup into the event that stops the planet for a month every 4 years. And then, especially because Mexico '70 is the first one that's televised on any grand scale around the world. And then every World Cup subsequently is kind of in the shadow of Mexico '70. And our story ends with Lionel Messi rising to the challenge of history in Qatar in what were Pele's last conscious days on earth. I mean, that's something you couldn't script it. I think the way that Pelé is crucial to the arc of the tale that we're trying to tell in Mundiales.
And as you said, it was a two-hander with Mark. Were there any tidbits or anecdotes that either you enjoyed finding out about or finding out more detail about, or just enjoyed putting to paper?
Well, there's one. This is a little bit niche, I think, because not many people are old enough to remember Uncle Arthur from It's a Knockout and Jeux Sans Frontières. Uncle Arthur Ellis, he was he was an avuncular figure who was a kind of official, but he'd made his name as a football referee, and in 1954 he became the most hated man in Brazil because he refereed Brazil against Hungary in the quarterfinal. It was the Battle of Bern. It just degenerated into chaos and fisticuffs, and he gave a penalty against Brazil, for which Brazil launched an official protest, accusing Uncle Arthur of blowing his whistle in the service of the Kremlin and international communism, godless communism. Quite extraordinary accusation for Uncle Arthur. I found on good quality footage, I found the penalty. It's handball. And I found it on grainy footage. You can't see it, but on good quality footage, you can clearly see the handball by the Brazilian centre-back. I ran into his son, actually, the son of this centre-back the other week.
Wow.
Just by clear coincidence. So finding that made me feel like a kind of a Sherlock Holmes of football. Finally, that mystery could be explained. It was a penalty. Uncle Arthur was right. And he wasn't after all. I can clear him of the charge of blowing his whistle in the service of the Kremlin and international godless communism.
Great stuff. So that book is called Mundiales, great accompaniment heading into this tournament. I don't want to get in trouble with my own geographic demarcation here, Tim. I did spend some time in Latin America last year, predominantly Mexico and Colombia. And for all that there are delineations between North and Central and South America, football is certainly a constant which exists right through. And it can't be overstated how enfolded it is within all manner of culture in that part of the world. And from a footballing perspective, predominantly, South American teams have a great record in CONCACAF, which is where this upcoming World Cup is taking place.
Yeah, 100% record. Brazil won in Mexico 70, Argentina won in Mexico 86, and Brazil won in USA 94. It is a long, long way away. There's a statistic that people who follow me will tire of hearing me say during this competition. The distance between Buenos Aires and Mexico City is further than that between London and Mumbai. That's a long, long way away. We're in midwinter here. You know, look at the temperature that the players are going to be subjected to. But yes, South America has a 100% record, although I think that this is going to be the most difficult one. If you look at that Brazil win in USA 94, you look at the European teams and their level, and you compare it with the European teams now. And France didn't even qualify for USA 94. Spain did, but they were a completely different footballing animal. Their footballing culture has changed remarkably in the subsequent decades. So you got France and Spain far, far stronger. England as well. I mean, England didn't qualify for USA 94. Look at the amount of talent that England can call on now. And it is no coincidence, I think, that every Brazil campaign since they won the last World Cup the last time in 2002 has ended as soon as they've come up against the European side in the knockout stages. And that's part of the explanation for the fact that now Brazil have a European coach. Come on down, Carlo Ancelotti.
Yeah. And we might start, you mentioned this crescendo of your book being Messi lifting the World Cup, and we should start with the champions. The Messi chronology is interesting from a World Cup point of view because 2006, 20 years on, he was an emergent force at that stage still. Like Riquelme was still the beatmaker in that team. 2010, it was Messi's team. He had the number 10 shirt, but it was Maradona, melodrama. He had main character energy. 2014 proved to be a full crescendo in many ways. It did seem like it would, like we look back prior to 2022 and thought that might have been his best chance. Ball goes, kick of a ball another way, and they beat Germany that day, and he has his crowning moment in his prime probably. Then you get to 2018 where again, even just looking at something as easy as his age, you're thinking, okay, 2018, we're getting close to a time where he might be running out of chances. And for all that they lost to eventual champions France 4-3, that scoreline didn't really tell the whole tale. They went toe-to-toe and France were much better than them. And to turn that around 4 years later, and when he's in the winter of his career, or what seemed like then the winter of his career, to have this unbelievable performance where he stood up in the realest way and delivered a World Cup to Argentina, and we saw the scenes which came. It did feel like if that was a Western, that he's won his World Cup, he sails off or strides off into the sunset and never to be seen again. And yet here we are. He is to be seen again, Tim. Maybe not the focal point he was in 2022, but still Argentina will be hanging a lot of their hopes on him in a few weeks' time.
It is an extraordinary story. It's a tale of two Lionels, really, because Argentina 2018, they're an absolute shambles. And he'd already flirted with retiring from the international game. And you really thought then that, right, that's going to be it. He's not going to bother with this anymore. And Scaloni takes over as a coach on one single ground. He's cheap. They have to pay off their coach, Sampaoli, who was on a long-term contract. Scaloni just happens to be there. He'd been one of the observers of Argentina's opponents during 2018. He's never coached a senior team in his life. Diego Maradona at the time says, he's a nice lad, this Scaloni, but you wouldn't pick him to direct traffic, let alone the national team. And you couldn't really disagree with him. And look at it now. It's not only, remember, Argentina hadn't won a senior title since the Copa America of 1993. They've now, like that Spain side of a decade and a half ago, they've won a World Cup sandwiched between two continental titles. It is an extraordinary run of success, exactly at the point where you thought that Messi might give it up. Part of that is Scaloni, I think, managing. He's a special person, Messi, I think, in that he's very much a kind of Maradona of the PlayStation era, and that introverted nature. I think for a long time it kind of intimidated his teammates, because imagine you get picked for Argentina, all you want to do is win Messi's approval, and he doesn't say anything. And when Scaloni took over, he didn't pick Agüero for a while, and the rationale was that Agüero is Messi's great mate. He only talks to Agüero, so let's drop Agüero. Let's force him to talk to someone else. But Messi, this coincided with a time when Messi was starting to fall out with Barcelona. And I think for the first time, Argentina became priority 1, 2, and 3. And the Argentine people felt this. The Copa America in 2019, when they come third, you can see something start to happen. Suddenly, Messi is becoming the encouraging leader. And Di Maria, soon after that tournament, he said, I remember Di Maria has been playing alongside Messi a long, long time. And soon after that 2019 Copa, he said to the Argentine media, I like this Messi. Obviously, the subtext being, I wasn't that keen on the Messi beforehand, And so then they began to build a team when it was Messi and his fan club. But as you said, the group dynamics have to change a little bit, or they've had to change. And Messi kept us all in suspense about whether he was going to play this. And we didn't know 100% until the squad was the 26 was announced a few days ago. But Argentina are not nearly as dependent on him as they were. This has been one of the good things about their cycle. They have learned to play without him. Julian Alvarez has stepped up. Some of their best football, perhaps the best performance of the entire Scaloni years, when they dismantled Brazil 4-1 a year and a half ago, just over a year ago. That was without Messi. When they won the final in the Copa America 24, they improved after Messi went off injured. So the group dynamics has changed a little bit. Messi's not expected to carry the whole show anymore. May not play every minute of every game, but no doubt about it, he's still very, very important to the cause.
Yeah, because you think back to that tournament, and the likes of Lautaro Martinez started the campaign in 2022, and Argentina, I'm not saying they stumbled onto their best team, but they arrived at their best team through playing matches. Yep. And, for all that, there was Qatar connotations to how that World Cup was talked about. It was also post-COVID, and the way Argentina played, this sort of like post-COVID greyness burst away with this technicolor football that they were playing in moments, like just magical moments that saw them through. And yeah, Alvarez was a big part of that. Like he came and Enzo Fernandez, who at that stage was off Broadway, centre stage by the end of the thing. Alexis McAllister was a Brighton player, and now he's a champion footballer with Liverpool. And it goes on and on. So, as you said, probably less dependent on Messi. But having said that, still the same core. I think 17 players from the last squad are still there. Yeah. So Scaloni's...
Which effectively is 19. Okay. Because Lo Celso and Nico Gonzalez were only missing from Qatar because they picked up injuries later on. They were fundamental parts of the team who couldn't go to the World Cup. So effectively, it's 19, which is good and bad. It's good in terms of the midfield, that continuity, and Enzo and McAllister are now consolidated, full of the swagger of being world champions. They've lost Di Maria though, which is a hard. I think it's impossible to replace. The place where the continuity is a problem is defence. It's the same defensive unit, and that's not really by choice. That's because no one has come through. No, Scaloni's had a look at a few defenders and hasn't been convinced by any of them. And if you remember the number of times that defensive unit collapsed under pressure in Qatar, you think this World Cup with an extra knockout round, there's a day when this is going to go wrong. And history tells us it's very difficult, if not impossible, to do what Argentina are trying to do. Italy retained the World Cup in France in 38. Brazil retained the World Cup in Chile in 62. No one's ever retained it outside your own home continent. So, and history tells us this is a tough ask. Although I think in Argentina, maybe there's less melodrama about this one than there has been about previous times when they were champions. Because this team has been so victorious, arguably the most successful Argentina side in history. I think that there's probably more of an expectation. There's more of an acceptance if they don't win this time around. It won't quite be seen as a tragedy by so many. I think it's all right. This is a farewell to Messi, and as long as they manage to leave the scene with dignity, I think a lot of people in Argentina won't be too disappointed by that.
Are there many players in the squad in a similar fashion to maybe Enzo Fernandez the last time, where went from being maybe not as talked about heading into the World Cup and ultimately a player we all know now? Nico Paz, I know, is probably more high profile in that regard, but is he the kind of player who could light up a tournament like this and have a central role?
He's one of their big injury worries at the moment. Buendia of Aston Villa is very, very much on standby because they're worried. They've got a few injury concerns, but it seems that Nico Paz is the worst of them. He hasn't really gelled with Argentina yet, and I suspect it's difficult to fit him and Messi in together, not least because Messi wants the ball to feet. So ideally, with him, you want people who want the ball in front of them. It's one of the reasons, for example, that Felipe Coutinho couldn't possibly have succeeded in the front line at Barcelona when they had veteran Messi and veteran Suarez. You needed to have someone who could have the ball in front of them, just to stretch the play. And Coutinho was yet another one who wanted the ball to feet. So Paz, assuming that he's fit, he might get moments. But so far they found it hard. It could be his time. I wonder if his time is going to be after the World Cup when Messi is gone. But someone who certainly fits in this category is, only had a brief spell at Brighton, Valentin Barco, who, what is he? Is he a left back? No, he's not really a left back. He likes to play from left back rather than at left back. Good one-on-one. Can play either flank, can play through the middle. He could be the kind of joker off the pack figure that they unleash off the bench. He could be the closest that they've got to a kind of unorthodox Di Maria type player.
And if we move to Brazil, we couched it how Messi maybe belatedly got his crowning moment at a World Cup, and we talk about Neymar, another totemic figure of this century of football so far, in terms of how he's talked about and performance level and all these kinds of things. Somewhat unfairly, I think, and optically mostly, his biggest World Cup moment is a match he didn't even play. It's this remarkable scene in the World Cup semi-final in Brazil where his jersey's been held up and there's people weeping in the crowd before the game even starts, that he wasn't fit to play, and he's had near misses thereafter, and played well in matches, in elimination matches for Brazil. I think, especially against Belgium, he was very good. So you can't lay it at his door that he hasn't turned up for them in a World Cup, I don't think. And yet, it wasn't even a certainty that he would make this World Cup squad, and it's probably been a race against time for him to get there.
Yeah, on what he's produced since that serious knee injury in October 23, there's no way that, just on what he's produced, there's no way. I remember at his club in Saudi Arabia, wouldn't register him. They could register something like 15 foreign players, and he wasn't in the 15 because they didn't think he was fit enough. What he's done in Brazil since that, came home to Santos, hasn't really proved the Saudis wrong. Well, Jorge Jesus is the Portuguese coach that he had at that time. So it is an act of faith, this. He is, and he divides opinion in Brazil. Many would criticize this call up. It would seem that the dressing room really like him. He's very popular in the dressing room, and has been in most of the dressing rooms in which he's played. And this is something which has persuaded Ancelotti, but also Ancelotti has a reverence for talent, and will always give talent a little bit of slack. And I think the thinking here, because he's picked up another injury, exactly at the time when Ancelotti was hoping he was going to be able to be playing himself fitter and better than the club form that he's been showing, he's having to fight off another injury, which is a little bit of a worry, because it's an injury that could lead to further injuries when he comes back. But I think that the hope from Ancelotti is, it's not all about him anymore. No, it's Vinny's team now. It's Vinny Junior's team. But the hope is, I think, towards the end of the World Cup, as people tire, as they will cumulatively, with exposure to the extreme heat in which some of this competition will be played, that Neymar, even not operating anywhere near 100%, will have enough just to tip the balance. As the phrase right up until Qatar that was used about him is that Neymar is both bow and arrow. I don't think he can be the arrow anymore, but he can be the bow. He can be the man maybe to slip passes through for the likes of Vinny and Rafinha. But it's an act of faith that Ancelotti is taking. And since the squad now is 26, if it was 23, I don't know if this gamble would have been seen as worthwhile. But with 26 in the squad, I think Ancelotti thinks, well, yeah, maybe we can get something out of this. And all right, it's a circus. You bring Neymar in, it's a circus. But Ancelotti is clearly saying, I can cope with all of this. Seen it, been it, done it all. This isn't too much for me. I can be the ringmaster. I can control all of this. Bring it on. It's going to be fascinating.
Yeah, it's been demonstrable in his career. In fairness, it's been his calling card that he's able to maybe weave these supreme talents and personalities together into a coherent unit. So, what has the general perception been of an Ancelotti-led Brazil? I know we've chatted over the years, Tim, about perceptions of European football from South America and vice versa. So what has it been like having this Italian head honcho in charge of Brazil?
Well, he's just a genius in public relations. Really is. Right, the first press conference, and he'd been Real Madrid coach up until the Saturday. And then it's a Monday that he's giving his press conference. And he's saying he does it in Spanish. And he says, look, next time I'm going to do it in Portuguese. Okay? Next time. We've got coaches from Argentina who have been in Brazil for years and don't speak a word of Portuguese, do everything in Spanish. And here he is right from the start saying, I'm going to do it. So he's done all that. So he charms them all and just raises an eyebrow and charms them all. And he's done lots of press. He's been very accessible and he's immersing himself in the culture. He's shown lots of respect to domestic Brazilian football. He's gone to lots of games. So he's ticked all the right boxes. But the test is now. And they had just a fascinating warm-up game. I was in the stadium for that last Sunday night against Panama. And it was really, really interesting. And you look at the scoreline, 6-2, triumph. No, not really. Because it was a game of two halves. And he played the first half with his full-strength lineup, bar the centre-backs who were still coming back from the Champions League. And in the second half, 10 on the bench, he brought them all on. So it's two completely different teams. And the first half, his starting lineup really, really didn't work. They were really poor. Now that the idea that he's been going with is with a front four. That was going to be Estevan of Chelsea right wing. He's unfortunately missing out. So his immediate reserve, Luis Enrique, comes in there. And then reading across, you've got Rafinha, Mateus Cunha, Vini Jr. And in order for this to work, and it's Vini's team, Cunha has to really sacrifice. He has to drop back a long way. He has to do the left wing as well quite often, so Vini can be free. But that's the idea. But it only leaves you two men in the central midfield, and one of them is Casemiro, who's 34. And in that first half, Panama had more possession and as many shots, and Panama just weaved their patterns all around Bruno and Casemiro, and that was a real worry. And it's I've always been concerned about this formation, especially getting into the extreme heat when you want to run less. And here, this was a cool night. It's late autumn, cool night, and Bruno Guimaraes and Casemiro, they were past all. They were outnumbered and outplayed. Half time, different formation, three in central midfield, all former Premier League players. Fabinho comes on for Casemiro. Danilo Santos, who was at Forest, and Lucas Paquetá, who's at West Ham. And it just works. The three in midfield, it's more compact. They got more control. And suddenly, bang, 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 the chances are being created and the goals are going in. So Ancelotti he confessed he came away with that game, scratching his head with doubt. What are we going to do? What happens now? They've got a game on Saturday. They play Egypt in Cleveland. And that's going to be the first, I think, exposure to the heat. And it's going to be really, really interesting to see what the starting lineup is then. Because the front four idea, it really didn't look good. First half against Panama. Much, much better to have these floors exposed in a friendly 2 weeks before you kick off. But it's going to be interesting to see, because he's only got 5 midfielders in the squad. So he's left himself very, very light in that area. So even if he makes a tactical change and brings 3 in, he hasn't got very much. And I wonder if he's regretting some of the decisions that he made in his call-up.
Yeah, it was striking that Casemiro, upon Ancelotti's appointment, was seen like would have worked with him before, saw him as a panacea in that Brazil midfield. And
first thing he did was bring Casemiro back.
It was striking because in this part of the world, he was being written off, Casemiro that is, by all manner of pundits, yesterday's man, all that kind of stuff, and has notably been one of the best players in the Premier League this year. And in no small coincidence that Ancelotti's tapped into that, and the Brazil World Cup glory on the horizon, no doubt, tapped into Casemiro's own mind, to be fair. I want to ask you a question about Vini, but now that we're on the subject of midfield, and the Man United fans listening might want me to ask, I'm sure you've been inundated with requests about this, but a notable absentee from the squad is Ederson, who United have just spent around €40 million on. Anything to read into why he's not there, and what would he bring to this team and maybe the Man United team going forward?
Yeah, I would have taken him. Andres Santos was far closer to the squad, and that's I'm astounded that he's left out. Just because you've got Casemiro and you've got Fabinho, you haven't got a lot of legs there. But Ederson, he was in the 55. Doesn't have that huge profile in Brazil. He moved quite young, and he's been at relatively small clubs. First it was Salernitana and then Atalanta. Brazil had a look at him in the Copa America 2 years ago under the previous coach, and he hardly got on the field. And then he was forgotten. I wonder whether Ederson thinks he should have been more ruthless and moved away from Atalanta earlier. I wonder if look at going to United, even a United without playing European competition. Look what that's done for Cunha. It's done a lot for his profile. But yeah, I would have had him in, just because I think you're going to need more lung power in that sector during the course of the competition. This is when I say that Ancelotti might be regretting some of his. He's taking 9 defenders. He'd always said he was going to take 9, but I thought that was to give extra cover for Eder Militão, who was going to be the right back. who's been very injury prone, but he's broken down again. He won't go. So, he's got 9 defenders, 3 of whom can play pretty well. Danilo, the veteran Danilo, and Ancelotti says himself, he can play in any position in the back four. Ibanez, they're taking as a right back, but he's a centre back, really. Alexandro is a left back who can also give you the centre back if you need it. So you got 3 with some versatility. Why do you need 9? And that means with all the strikers that you're taking, that means one fewer midfielder. So that's decisions I think he might well live to regret.
Yeah, no, it was striking watching the Champions League final on those centre backs you're talking about. Marquinhos running over to console Gabriel, because that could has the makings of a great partnership in theory. But you mentioned a couple of times that Vinny Júnior, it's his team, and watching him for Real Madrid, and it feeds into his status maybe with that club. Sometimes intemperate, like if he's substituted early, he's complaining, maybe doesn't like playing second fiddle to Mbappe at times. You've mentioned that he's the alpha in this team. Does he take on a different sort of leadership hue with Brazil compared to maybe Real Madrid, or is that an unfair depiction?
What you mentioned Ancelotti getting the best out of talent. There was one thing that even he couldn't solve, and that was Mbappe and Vinny Júnior together. Well, Mbappe isn't here this time, so it is Vinny's side. He gets a lot of criticism in Brazil. This is, in terms of his international perception, his perception in the Brazil shirt. This tournament is almost make or break for him. There has been a worry that, I haven't seen Vinny say it, but certainly Rafinha said it, that Neymar should be in the squad. He's going to be the guy. Well, he can't be the guy. He's not what he was. The time is now for Rafinha and Vinny to be the guys, and so this is one of the worries amongst the punditry in Brazil, that these players are using Neymar as a kind of shield to hide behind. So in terms of the group dynamics, how that plays out between Neymar and Vinny, I think is going to be very, very interesting.
And of the other South American teams present at the World Cup, Tim, are there any that you think might trouble the latter stages of the competition? Obviously, we would have looked at Uruguay over the years and that stunning front three of 2010, for example, with Cavani and Forlan and Suarez. Anything around them would presumably lean on a fairly impressive looking midfield core there. And obviously Bielsa brings a little bit of star quality to the thing.
Well, when he took over after Qatar, it looked like a good mix, because they needed a generational change, and he's worked well, and that's what he did with Chile. Just walked in, brought in Vidal and Sanchez and so on, and away you go. And there are a core of players there that you can imagine playing the Bielsa way. Especially Valverde, but also Araujo, the defender, Darwin Nunez. He's got some wingers, and they started off brilliantly. Really, they were really, really good for a while. They were the form team for a while, and then 2 years ago came the Copa America in the States, where they had to spend a full month with him. And during the course of that month, it seems they decided that they really didn't like him at all. And shortly after that, Luis Suarez retired from international football. And he made a point of leaving the scene, just spitting blood at Bielsa, saying that he just creates a dreadful atmosphere in the dressing room. You meet him in the corridor, he doesn't even acknowledge your presence. No one from inside that dressing room came out and said Suarez is wrong. No one. And the results since then have been very, very poor. Now, you know what a Bielsa side is. But subsequently, it's not only the case that they're not scoring goals, they're not creating chances. And I don't know if you saw, for example, the game in March against England at Wembley. They hardly crossed the halfway line. And it's been like that and this is not what Bielsa wants to do. So they're in a terrible state. However, this is where Uruguay can be dangerous. A little bit of backs to the wall. They like that. And the format of the World Cup does give you the possibility just to play your way into the tournament. They're gonna have to find their mojo in the course of the tournament. Maybe relieved by the news that Bielsa will step down after the competition. They don't have to put up with him anymore. You wonder if his brand of aloof eccentricity works with today's younger players who perhaps need a little bit, would like a little bit more conversation. But if they can get Darwin Nunez back into form, there is still something there. There is still a possibility, although they are starting from a very, very low ebb. The total opposite of that are Ecuador. And you mentioned the Brazilian defenders in the Champions League final. Ecuadorian, one on each side. Pacho of Paris Saint-Germain, Hincapié of Arsenal. They got another terrific one, Ordonez, who I'm sure is going to be at a big club. He's been in Belgium for a while. I'm surprised he's been there for so long. It's just a fabulous defensive unit. They don't concede goals. They're at at the time of speaking, with one warm-up game to go. They're 18 unbeaten. They don't score. And they're still very dependent on Enner Valencia, former Premier League striker, who scored all of their goals in 2014. Now very, very much at the veteran stage. No one's really emerged to take the pressure off him in terms of goal scoring. But, and I'm sorry if this is a little bit too close to home, this is a World Cup where the Jack Charlton method of winning is possible. You don't have to win a game.
No.
You can just grind out results. And any side coming up against that Ecuador defensive unit has a hard task breaking them down. So I think Ecuador are potential dark horses.
Yeah, and like you mentioned with Uruguay, Fede Valverde has this sort of talismanic capacity, sort of Roy of the Rovers. He can grab games by the scruff of the neck. And similarly, maybe in a different way though, Moises Caicedo is such a brilliant player as well. So two talismanic players, as I said. And on the Jack Charlton point, Paraguay, it's great to see them back at a World Cup. People will remember in 2010, I think they reached the quarterfinals scoring just 3 goals, the lowest ever by a team to get to a quarterfinal. But they ran Spain close, like Spain who won the tournament. So as I said, the vibrancy of that team, it's great to see them back. I wonder what you think of their chances of maybe causing a shock.
That was probably the most difficult knockout game that Spain had in those 3 tournaments that they won. And Paraguay pushed them close, and haven't made any of the subsequent World Cups, and are back now, and a little bit like Ecuador and opposite to Uruguay, they're back on a high. And 2 years ago, it looked like they had no chance. And then came the current coach, Gustavo Alfaro, who's an Argentine, but he just kind of gets them. So it's an incredible connection that he's forged with the Paraguay side. There isn't a great deal of talent or ability. What they have comes from Julio Enciso, a little bit from Diego Gomez of Brighton as well. But they will compete as if their lives depended on it. They will defend with heroic resilience and bide their time and wait for their opportunity. And it's another team where the format could help them go deep into the tournament. I remember them reaching the final of the Copa America in 2011 without winning a single game. It was just draws. All the group games were drawn. The knockout games were drawn. Win the penalty shootout. They got through to the final where Forlan and Cavani and Suarez and Uruguay ended up winning the thing. But Paraguay are really, really up for this. And with a little bit of luck and a win behind them, they could go deep into the competition. They're not going to thrill the neutrals with the beautiful purity of their football. But if you like scrappers, if you like honest scrappers who are desperate to defend the colours of their shirt, then you could do far, far worse than get behind Paraguay.
Yeah, we'd love to be them, Tim. We'd love to be wearing green jerseys and scrapping it out over there, but unfortunately fell at the hurdle again. Last but not least, Colombia. We mentioned Vinny's team and, Messi's importance, these different kinds of players. When I was in Colombia, it did strike me that everybody wearing a Colombia shirt still had James Rodriguez 10. For all that Luis Diaz has probably kicked on to another level, he's been unbelievable for Bayern this year and shown that he can, saddle the responsibility. There is still a reliance maybe on Rodriguez as well they're expecting him to over-deliver on what he still has left in the tank.
Yeah, well, this is a tough one for the coach because he's gone all over the world, James, kind of without playing at any of the clubs that that he plays for. Recently, he hasn't been playing for Minnesota in the States. after not playing for his Mexican club, after not playing in Spain and not playing in Brazil. But he remains important to Colombia. Just how important is a big decision for the coach. It's very, very difficult to line up with Diaz, a central striker, and James. Really, really difficult to balance that one out. Now, Colombia had a long unbeaten run, which ended when they lost to Argentina in the final of the Copa America of 24. After that, they haven't been the same side, but all of their defeats had been just by single goal. And then in the friendlies at the end of March, they lost to Croatia, and then they played France. Now, France had just beaten Brazil. And for the Colombia game, France put out the reserves. And they demolished Colombia with an embarrassing ease. And the final score was 3-1. Colombia got a consolation goal. But it was 3-0 early, and the gulf between the sides was like 7 or 8. It was just a massacre. And Colombia came out to play, but with 2 strikers and a 10, it was just so easy for France to pass their way through them. It was a beautiful exhibition by the French reserves, and that strength in depth is staggering. So that has given the coach a problem. That was the last game before the World Cup squad is named, and he sees that his idea just isn't viable against the best opponents. Now, they played Costa Rica on Monday night, and James didn't play first half. And what they did first half was they gave Diaz a free role. So from there, he could start on the left wing, but he could come in and orchestrate the play. But he could also get up into the centre forward position. So that's one option. Not even having James, or leaving him for the second half when the opponents get tired. The way that they ended the game was with 2 holding midfielders and James in front of the 2 holders. And from that position, James played a superb ball that gave Luis Suarez a chance to clinch the game with the last goal in a 3-1 win. So you saw a couple of ideas there, different from the way that he'd been building his side beforehand. So I think he might have to shuffle his pack. I think the idea that he used for such a long time of Diaz, a central striker, and James, I don't think he's going to be able to use that he can use that for some of the games, maybe against the weaker opponents, perhaps. But say Portugal, the last game, Portugal's so good in midfield. I think that would be a huge, huge risk to start the game like that. So, you build your side over years and years and years, and then your last kind of rehearsal, you think, we need a rethink there. So this is where the coach, Nestor Lorenzo, he's going to have to earn his money.
And last one before I let you go, you've had a sterling journalism career, but haven't spoken to you over the years, Tim. You could have probably had a second life in scouting, because I remember you mentioning Moises Caicedo when he could have been gotten for a snip, and now he's a £100+ million player. Is there any of those domestic players who you're looking forward to seeing on the world stage with the capacity to light it up?
Yeah, there's a fair few mistakes there, fair few offences to be taken into consideration in my scouting career as well. There aren't many, actually, because so many now get taken when they're 18. It's really in terms of like unknowns or lesser known players. I wonder. It's a player I've seen very little of, but an Ecuadorian called Arevalo, who's Spanish born and represented Spain, I think, at youth levels. Now he's an emerging talent. I wonder if he's going to be the man who might be unleashed as a secret weapon to try and take some of the strain off Enner Valencia for those goals. So I'm very interested to see him, just because he's played all of his. He started in Spain for Santander. He's in Germany now, so I don't know a lot about him. So I want to see him, but he could be one who makes a little breakthrough. But in terms of domestic, quite a lot of 32 players are based in Brazil. 32. And that's totally a new thing. And Brazil have been signing up players from other countries in South America, and also quite a few have come back from Europe to play in Brazil to boost their visibility with their national team coaches and get into their squads. Quite a few Ecuadorians and Colombians have done that. So we've got more South American based players, certainly Brazil based players than we've had. The best one, I think, Ecuador didn't call up, and I don't understand that at all. So the one that excites me most and partly because I don't know a great deal about him. Like strong left-footed striker, maybe support striker at level of Ecuador. So I'll be interested to see if Ecuador use him and how much they use him. But in terms of hidden talents, they're whisked off to Europe when they're, not long after they're out the womb. European clubs whisk them away these days.
Well, great to chat as ever, Tim. Hopefully can check in again during the tournament.
Look forward to it. Cheers.